At the end of our last episode, America was on its knees. The banks were closed, the factories were silent, and a quarter of the nation was out of work. The government's response had been too little, too late, and the American people were losing hope. But in the darkness of the Great Depression, a new voice emerged, promising action and a new deal. This is the story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his ambitious, controversial, and revolutionary plan to save America. It's a story about how the government went to war with the Depression, creating an alphabet soup of new programs that would change the relationship between Americans and their government forever. But did it work? Was it a savior or a step towards socialism? And what was the cost? If you're ready to see how America reinvented itself to survive its greatest economic challenge, then make sure you're subscribed and the notification bell is on. We're diving deep into one of the most transformative eras in U.S. history. The presidential election of 1932 was a landslide. The American people overwhelmingly rejected Herbert Hoover and embraced the optimistic governor of New York, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR Roosevelt. A distant cousin of Teddy Roosevelt, was a charismatic and confident leader who projected an aura of strength, despite being paralyzed from the waist down by polio, a fact often hidden from the public by the press. In his inaugural address in March 1933, FDR delivered one of the most famous lines in American history, directly addressing the nation's despair. He said, "First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." It was a powerful message of hope and a call to action. Roosevelt promised a new deal for the American people, guided by a simple philosophy: try something. If it fails, admit it and try something else. But above all, try something. His first action was to declare a national bank holiday, closing every bank in the country to stop the panic and give the government time to assess the situation. Just days into his presidency, he began speaking directly to the American people through the radio in what became known as his fireside chats. Imagine the scene. Families huddled around their radios, listening as the president's calm, reassuring voice explained his plan to save the banks. He wasn't talking down to them. He was explaining complex policy in a simple, personal way, as if he were a guest in their living room. This built a crucial foundation of trust, and when the banks reopened, people deposited more money than they withdrew. FDR and his team of advisors, a diverse group of academics and experts known as the Brain Trust, immediately launched a period of intense legislative activity called the 100 Days. In just over 3 months, Congress, spurred by the sense of crisis, passed a flood of new legislation aimed at tackling the Depression from every angle. And at his side was his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, who completely redefined the role of the First Lady. She traveled the country tirelessly, acting as her husband's eyes and ears, visiting coal mines, factories, and impoverished communities. The New Deal wasn't one single plan. It was a barrage of programs, often known by their acronyms, that historians group into the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. First, relief. This was like stopping the bleeding. These programs were designed to provide immediate, direct help to the unemployed and impoverished. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, was one of the most popular. It put millions of young, unemployed men to work on environmental projects like planting trees, fighting forest fires, and creating national parks. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, created later in what's known as the Second New Deal, was even larger. It employed millions in public works projects, building everything from roads and bridges to schools and hospitals. The WPA also famously hired artists, writers, and actors to create public murals, plays, and historical records, preserving the nation's culture. Next was recovery. The goal here was to restart the economy. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, AAA, aimed to help struggling farmers by paying them subsidies to produce less, thereby raising crop prices. This was controversial, as it involved destroying crops and livestock while people were going hungry, but it did raise farm incomes. The National Recovery Administration, NRA, was another cornerstone of the early New Deal. It created codes of fair competition for businesses, setting minimum wages, maximum work hours, and fair prices. Businesses that complied could display a blue eagle sticker with the slogan, "We do our part." The goal was to stop the downward spiral of wage cuts and price drops. The Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, was even more ambitious. It built a series of dams to provide cheap hydroelectricity, flood control, and jobs to one of the poorest and most underdeveloped regions in the country, transforming the entire region. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, was reform. These programs were designed to fix the underlying problems in the financial system to prevent another depression from ever happening again. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, was a game changer. It insured bank deposits, meaning that if a bank failed, people would not lose their life savings. This immediately restored faith in the banking system. Another key reform was the Securities and Exchange Commission, which was created to regulate the stock market and prevent the kind of reckless speculation and fraud that led to the 1929 crash. And in 1935 came the Social Security Act, a landmark piece of legislation that created a national system of retirement pensions for the elderly, as well as unemployment insurance and aid for mothers, children, and the disabled. But not everyone was a fan of the New Deal. Roosevelt faced criticism from all sides. On the right, conservatives and business leaders, organized into groups like the American Liberty League, argued that the New Deal was a massive overreach of government power. They called it socialism and complained that it was creating a huge national debt and interfering with the free market. On the left, critics argued the New Deal didn't go far enough. Senator Huey Long of Louisiana, a charismatic populist nicknamed the Kingfish, promoted a Share Our Wealth plan, which called for taxing all income over $1 million to give every family a comfortable home and income. Another influential voice was Father Charles Coughlin, the radio priest, who at first supported the New Deal, but later turned against FDR, accusing him of being too friendly to bankers. Dr. Francis Townsend, a retired doctor, proposed a plan to give every American over 60 a monthly pension of $200, an idea that helped build support for what would become Social Security. Roosevelt's biggest challenge, however, came from the Supreme Court. The court, dominated by conservative justices, began striking down key New Deal programs, like the AAA and the National Recovery Administration, NRA, declaring them unconstitutional because they overstepped federal authority and interfered with the power of states to regulate their own economies. Furious, FDR responded in 1937 with a controversial proposal that shocked the nation. He asked Congress for the power to appoint one new Supreme Court justice for every existing justice over the age of 70. This was widely seen as a court-packing scheme, an attempt to fill the court with his supporters. The plan was incredibly unpopular with both Democrats and Republicans, who saw it as an assault on the separation of powers. It was defeated in Congress, marking a major political blunder for Roosevelt. So, did the New Deal end the Great Depression? The answer is complex. While it didn't fully end the crisis, that would take the massive government spending of World War II, it did provide relief for millions and save the nation from complete collapse. But its most significant impact was a fundamental change in the role of the American government. Before the New Deal, the government took a largely hands-off approach to the economy. After, Americans came to expect the government to take an active role in managing the economy, providing social safety nets, and protecting citizens from economic disaster. This also dramatically increased the power and influence of the presidency itself. Programs like Social Security and the FDIC are still with us today, forming a core part of American life. Every time a retiree gets a Social Security check or a person deposits money in a bank without fear, they are feeling the lasting legacy of the New Deal. The New Deal was a bold, imperfect, and transformative response to America's greatest crisis. It redefined American liberalism and set the stage for the nation's role in the turbulent decades to come. As the 1930s came to a close, a new and even greater threat was rising across the oceans. A threat that would demand an entirely different kind of American leadership. The New Deal permanently changed what Americans expect from their government. Do you think this expanded role is a good thing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay curious.